Hi, humans. Welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are recording on this cloudy, the world is freezing uh, Thursday. I apologize. My throat was doing a thing. I wanted to come on and talk about things. And first, I want to acknowledge that, the world is still on fire. Things are still being extra weird, if not terrible. And it is getting to a place of exhaustion, I can imagine, for all of us. It's curious to me. I was thinking this morning about the pandemic and, when we were all going through the same thing at the same time, and the therapist still had to show up for everyone else who was dealing with their own anxiety and stress and grief and overwhelm while we were dealing with our own anxiety, stress, grief, and overwhelm. And I think I've shared with you guys, like, after 2020, and certainly 2021, the adjustment, I was exhausted and I needed to take a break. So I took a year off. We can't all do that, but if we could, that would be great. What it did was teach me, and certainly us, how to endure really challenging and stupid things, and still exist. The funny and interesting part is that when I was seeing clients at that time, they were still dealing with just like regular stuff. I mean, it was the exhaustion, grief, overwhelm, blah, blah, blah. But then it was also just like relationship challenges and anxiety and sadness and grief and, just their garden variety regular things. And I mean, right now is different in that it feels heavy and big and sad and scary. And the therapists are also going through all of that too. And so, it's an opportunity to have a little compassion and awareness for ourselves. But what I wanted to talk about today is this concept of wisdom. And my daughter uses the phrase often of sharing wisdom, right? And I find it curious and interesting when I think about being this age and being someone who's been through a lot of things. I was talking to a client earlier and really thinking like we've had similar experiences at very different timelines, right? I think they're in their 30s, and I am approaching 53 very quickly. But thinking about this idea of how we share wisdom and where that comes from, and certainly it doesn't come from age exclusively, like age on the planet chronology being, a certain age, but it comes from this just awareness, right? As we've talked about directed attention and having awareness. Little kids have a ton of wisdom, and they are reminding us on a regular basis based on their experience and their newness, right, to the world. But also their logic and just really kind of understanding like that doesn't make any sense. Why would we do it that way? And how we share that with one another, especially right now. I was thinking about, as I do, right? I was on TikTok earlier, or maybe yesterday. I tried to really minimize my exposure to social media, and especially right now. I haven't been making as much content. And part of that is just, and I talk about like changing your algorithm and doing those things on a regular basis. When I was, observing it and thinking about this topic, what I was thinking about is like, there are people all over the world sharing their wisdom, whatever that is, right? If it's a recipe, if it's a makeup tutorial, if it's, their experience and their observation of the world, all of that is sharing wisdom. And really thinking about how people are using social media to disseminate information based on their perspective and their wisdom, what they have learned over time, and how they are sharing that message with the world. I think I shared with you guys, maybe I didn't. My daughter and I had gone to the growers market in the summer, and she's walking around and she's like, it's so cool to just see everybody's brain exposed in these little, like, tents and tables and stuff. And that was such a very cool way, but interesting way of thinking about, what she was experiencing, because it was very much everybody's brain, something they are passionate about or good at and sharing with the rest of us in this space. And I see social media sometimes that way as well, making a sourdough, loaf with a bunch of stuff in it, or, teaching how to organize their snacks or pantry. And definitely, I like to watch creepy stuff because you guys know I love horror movies, but, sharing their lore and urban legends and, certainly stories that have been passed down based on experience. I was having a conversation with my mom the other day, and she changed the subject. And it was funny because she was like, what do you know about Sasquatch? And I was like, wait, what? It was like a left turn I wasn't expecting. And she said she'd never shared this story with me, which I find so interesting. She said she had forgotten it until she had watched this YouTube. But she was like, I remember one of my tios my uncles had come to the house and had talked about seeing this like giant hairy man out in the forest or the woods or whatever. And she was like, I wonder if that was like the Yeti or the Sasquatch or whatever. And I was like, why have you never told me this before? That's so interesting and weird. But that's how we share wisdom, right? That's how we share our experiences with other people and certainly other generations. And right now is an interesting time because I think about history often because, you guys know that I'm a super big fan of history, but really recognizing that it does repeat itself. And somebody had said to me the other day, like, the past is just gone. It's already happened. And I was like, yes, and I agree, right? We've got to let go of things if it happened before now, because holding on to it creates depression. And what it does is it leaves echoes, right? It lingers to remind us about things. And in this cosmic middle school of our experience, oftentimes we need to have those guides of what has happened before now so that we can make different choices today. Or we can use that experience and wisdom to ground us in like, okay, I know how to do this. My job, and I speak of my job often because it's literally what I do day to day, is to remind people of the experiences they have had as I question and ask, tell me who you are, tell me what you've been through, tell me your coping skills so that we can use those moving forward in this current situation, and reminding people of where they've been so that they can move forward in a sense of understanding. And it's that wisdom that we carry even within ourselves of, oh, I know how to get through hard things, or this is a part of my brain that I know how to use. Let me remember how to do that, right? Remember that wisdom. And then how do I give that to our next generation? I speak of, our ancestors. My daughter also loves to use that word, but, the things that we have been through, that our families have been through, that our previous generations have been through, to remind us how to do things, right? Somebody asked me the other day if I knew how to make tortillas. I do. And I remember when I was young in my 20s trying to figure that out, because I didn't live close to family. So it was like, me and my girlfriends trying to figure out how to make tortillas. And this was pre-internet, so you can just look it up or look up a YouTube or an Instagram on how to do that. And I remember thinking to myself, when I am a certain age or when I have a certain role or title, I'll know how to do this better. And so I do, actually. But part of that is not being the certain age or title. It's experience, right? It's working at it. My grandmother on my dad's side, my grandma Corina, made the best tortillas, like just the best. and they were just perfectly fluffy and light and airy and just enough salt, and they were amazing. And I remember thinking then, because my dad loved it when his mom would come and make tortillas at our house, I need to remember how to do this. She passed away when I was younger, but it was one of those things that I remember, like, okay, when you're a grandma, you will know how to do tortillas best, right? You know how to make them round, you know how to make them whatever. And so that was a wisdom, an opportunity for me to think about how she did that and remember that time. When I speak with clients, I often will ask about their childhood or their family of origin or what they observed, what they felt in those times. And a lot of times clients have said, like, I don't remember a lot of my childhood. Like, I just got through it, right? And it isn't until I sit down with them and talk with them about their experiences can they, remember, but also get in touch with those parts of themselves, that resilience or that coping skill that was actually really helpful, those things that they enjoyed, the fun or the whimsy or the authenticity that we have to compartmentalize and put away in our adult lives. And so it's helpful to remember the wisdom that we have even within ourselves, but certainly in the people that we care about, or the people that we felt safe with, or the people that we connect with. Or I remember that I am like this part of my grandma, or this part of my aunt, or this part of my cousin, or this part of my mom or dad, or whatever. Really sharing those memories and living in that experience, even just for a moment, so that we can get in touch with ourselves, so we can ground in what we know to be sacred and true. I say all of that to think about, again, the time that we're in, and the things that we have observed, things that we know to be true, and things that we know to be kind and compassionate and humane as we get further and further from that in our experience. In our relatively young country, with our burgeoning historical things that are happening, really remembering those things that bring us back to our humanness, the things that we are alike in, not so much focused on our differences or the things that divide us. It's helpful to remember that these things have happened before and have happened in other places, are happening here. Yeah, I think about those things, and without getting too emotional about it, acknowledging that, yeah, right now is not normal. It's not helpful. It's actually really scary, and things are changing globally, but also in our neighborhoods, in our backyards, in our experience. And so if we do not look it in the face, name it, we cannot change it or fix it. We cannot address things. We live in the anxiety or the fear of, I don't know what's going to happen next. Well, if we look back at our history, and certainly at the wisdom that has been given to us before now, we know what's going to happen. And it's going to be helpful if we take those lessons and acknowledge, how did we overcome that, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about the 30s in Germany, because the rhetoric is similar, the things that are being said out loud. They're saying the quiet parts out loud in newsrooms and on TV and in, our social media. If we're not paying attention, then we are going to get caught up and have similar things happen, right? So Germany in the 1930s did not look like concentration camps and, all of those things. Hitler did not invade Poland until 1939. So those things were happening far before the really, intense conflicts happened. And they're happening now, and they're happening far more quickly. These are things we have to pay attention to, right? I don't like to get super political because the human experience is a challenging experience, but we are in a time where it's important to acknowledge that we're all going through this at the same time. We're all observing the same things. And even if we have opposing viewpoints about the rhetoric and the things that are happening, we do have to acknowledge it, right? And I can't just let things happen and get on and talk about coping skills and communication and relationships and blah, blah, blah without acknowledging what's happening, because it's affecting all of us all the time, right? It is happening, and we cannot just like put our heads in the sand. And I think I talked about that last time, to be like, okay, well, I'm just not going to pay attention to it. We kind of have to, right? And so we have to look at the wisdom prior to now to acknowledge we've seen this happen before. And if we continue to obfuscate or pretend like it's not happening, it will get worse. It's getting worse. It's been getting worse for the last year. It's funny. I had lunch with a girlfriend yesterday, and so she was like, I think that I might be ready to make some choices. And I was like, remember in 2016 when you guys thought I was crazy? And, you know, I was prepping and doing all the things. I was like, we're here, dude. And she was like, no, I get it now. I understand. And yet we still have to do day-to-day stuff. Like, we still have to go to the grocery store and get milk, right? We still have to go to our jobs and make widgets. We still have to do the things. The both can be true at the same time. And it's that dialectical idea that holding two ideas in our brain at the same time, that we have to get through the day-to-day, make the widgets, make the donuts, do the thing, and also recognize that, like, yeah, this is not normal. This is not okay. And, you know, we have to check on our neighbors. We have to check on our friends. We have to start carrying our documentation, at least a copy, right? Because I travel so often, I often have my passport in one bag or another, right? And so certainly the bag that I travel with, I have my current passport, and I have my expired passport just because I was getting it done, right? I carry it with me without consciously thinking about it, but I carry it with me. And now it's probably a good idea to start carrying those things with us. The wisdom of the past is to hopefully not repeat it, and yet here we are. Or to repeat it, right? To repeat the things that helped us get through. I think about, you know, again, historical times, hunter-gatherer times, like how our brains have evolved. And we have to be able to use those skills and tools that have been used before now to survive, to keep ourselves safe, to acknowledge that, like, okay, I need to remember who I am and what's important to me. I need to reach out to the people that I feel safe with and can be my whole self. I need to also be aware so that I can keep myself alive, right? It's interesting and curious when I am working with people who are dealing with a challenging situation, a temporary situation that feels overwhelming. I often will help them ground in what they know to be true so that they can fact check their way through it and, you know, be able to say, okay, I know who I am. I'm back in my body. You know, I'm not just in this brain that I have that can sometimes be anxious and overwhelmed. I have to get back into, like, okay, let me get back in my body. What can I control right now? What can I make sure I have? And who do I know that can help me get there, right? Who can help me and remind me of what's going on? It's curious, again, to live in that double didactic space of being a person in the world, being a parent, being a caregiver, being a daughter, being a son, being a cousin, being a, you know, brother, a sister, all those things, those titles that I talk about often, and also being a citizen of the world, right? Being a person dealing in hard things. It's curious to me how people are, you know, holding up signs and also holding up their phone and their videos, making and documenting the history that we're going through, and also being able to share the wisdom of how do we get through this. There is a crazy winter storm coming through the eastern and southern United States. Ice, just falling from the sky, not snow, ice, and frozen water, and also, um, yeah, it's a little scary to think that we've had basically 60-degree days, and then it'll go down to 12 over the weekend. What are the wisdom? What are the things that you can share? Who can you check on to make sure that they are safe and doing okay? Who do we need to make sure that has, groceries and, a charged phone and all of those things? Like, that's how we share the wisdom. That's how we check in with the community that we live in. As isolated and as much as I enjoy my solitude, I also recognize that I have to check on my community, right? And I have to give those skills and tools to my clients so that they can also get through and survive to the next situation, circumstance, thing that they're going to go through. And so check on your people, make sure you have what you need, and get back into your body, even when that's scary, and move on to the next thing, the next place, the next time, because this is not forever. It does feel big and overwhelming, but the wisdom is we have, as a species, been here before, and not just once, like over several hundreds of years, we've been here before. And so we need to remember how to take care of each other. We need to remember, again, that humanity. We need to remember how do we get through hard things. If we have all survived our childhoods and our families of origin, if we have all survived those hard jobs and hard, disgusting things, we can get through this. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of those things. That wisdom lives inside of us, and it lives in those people that we care about. So ask the question, get curious, remind each other, how do we get through this? How do we show our humanity? I would love to tell you that this is going to be over soon. I don't think that's true. And I would love to tell you that, this is just a weird time and blah, blah, blah. I watch a lot of apocalyptic movies just because I find it fascinating. And though I recognize that it is fantasy and it is not always what it's going to look like, we're headed in a weird direction. And so the wisdom is to share our knowledge, share our experience, share our compassion, share our grace with one another. Whatever that looks like, right, for you. I didn't start this concept of the podcast to share all the things to be super political or to be divisive or to, the whole point of the podcast when I started it in 2019 with Kat was just to have interesting conversations and to share those conversations with one another. And so that's what I'm doing, right? My idea of sharing wisdom is to say things out loud. And because this platform affords me the ability to talk to people literally all over the world, thank you to everyone. I'm just going to keep using it. I'm going to keep saying it. And if it makes you uncomfortable and you don't want to listen anymore, that's okay. Like, thank you for joining us when you did. But I'm not going to say the quiet parts quietly anymore. We're going to say them out loud. And share that wisdom with one another. Ask those questions. Be curious. But also remind yourself of the wisdom that you carry inside of you that have gotten you through the really hard times. Right? Remind yourself, how did I get through that before? Right? What was a good part of, that experience? How did I contribute to it? And also, check in with people and be like, remind me again who I am. Sometimes I forget. Remind me who you are, right? Sometimes I forget. And use those coping skills to be able to get through it, because right now you're going to need it. And can't put your head in the sand, can't imagine that it's not true. Also, you can have hope. Like, there's so many other things that in small gestures, in small ways are going well. And so we can remind ourselves of those things too, right? I'm so grateful to have community and people in my life that I can go to dinner with, and go for a walk and talk about things. I'm very blessed, very lucky, and very grateful. So there's your nugget. Yeah, I'll just keep posting. I'll keep saying things, but check in on your people and check in on yourself and make sure that you are doing the things to get you through, because yeah, it's weird and it's hard and it's gross and it's scary and it's sad, and all of those things are true. And allow yourself to acknowledge it and feed it, name it, and then fix it. Right? Work on it a little bit every day. There's your nugget. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.